The sun was already dipping low when a swirl of dust rose from the narrow dirt road, spiraling into the warm evening air as an old, rattling pickup truck made its way toward a small, weathered farmhouse. Inside the cab, a young woman sat in silence, her hands wrapped tightly around the handle of a single worn suitcase resting on her lap. Her gaze was fixed out the window, but her eyes didn't really see the endless stretch of golden fields rolling past. Her mind wandered elsewhere, to memories laced with pain, to the sting of judgment, to a town that had never truly accepted her. Her name was Clara, and though she barely moved, her stillness screamed with the weight of humiliation and heartbreak. She had been sent away, cast out, really, not because she had done anything truly wrong, but because she didn't fit the mold that others had tried to force her into. In the town where she was raised, people always whispered about her. They talked about her weight, her quietness, her gentle awkwardness, the way she didn't quite belong anywhere. For years she had endured the glances, the muttered comments, the unspoken but ever-present cruelty. But lately, the whispers had turned into sneers, and the sneers became condemnation. It was no longer enough for her to feel like an outsider. They had decided she needed to be punished. The excuse was to teach her humility and responsibility. She was to live and work on the farm of a man she had never met, someone deemed more suitable to straighten her out. But everyone knew the truth. This wasn't about guidance. It was exile. They wanted her gone. To them, she was a burden best passed on to someone else. Clara hadn't cried when they told her. She didn't protest. She was far too used to swallowing her emotions, burying them where no one could see. What good would it do now? The truck rolled to a halt in front of a modest farmhouse, its paint chipped and faded but the structure still standing proud against the evening sky. Clara stepped out slowly, her dress clinging slightly in the thick, humid air. She tightened her grip on the suitcase, as though letting go would mean unraveling entirely. A man stood on the porch watching her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with skin darkened by years under the sun. His clothes were simple, work-worn jeans, a button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves, but they were clean. His expression was unreadable, not warm, not cold. Just steady. Without a word, he glanced at her suitcase and gave a small nod, then motioned toward the porch. There was no pity in his eyes, and oddly, Clara found that comforting. Pity stung in a different way, subtle, but cutting. A few steps behind him stood another figure, an older man with a long white beard and sharp eyes that looked straight through her, as if he knew far more than he let on. Clara's stomach twisted with unease. She was no stranger to judgmental stares, but this one felt different. This wasn't dismissal. It was assessment. As the sun slipped beneath the horizon and the first chorus of crickets stirred the stillness, Clara stood at the edge of a new beginning she hadn't chosen. And yet deep down, in some small corner of her heart, she wondered, hoped, that perhaps this place might not break her, but build her into someone she had always longed to become. Clara had no idea how hard life on the farm would be, but she knew she couldn't go back. Whatever lay behind her in that small town, those judging eyes, cruel whispers, and lingering shame, was not something she wanted to return to. The first weeks on the farm were brutal in every possible way. Clara was not used to physical labor. Her body ached in places she hadn't even known could ache. Every morning, she rose before the sun, dragging herself from the small bed in the attic to face another day of exhausting chores. She fed the animals, carried heavy pails of water, hauled scratchy, uncooperative bales of hay, and trudged through the fields beneath the punishing sun. Her clothes clung to her with sweat, and her hands, once soft, developed blisters that cracked open under pressure. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and self-doubt. Luke, the farmer who had taken her in, was a man of few words. He never yelled, never scolded her, but he also offered no comforting pats on the back or sympathetic glances. He gave instructions plainly and without embellishment, expecting Clara to keep up, to learn. And she tried. She struggled, not just with the physical demands, but under the heavy weight of her insecurities. Every mistake, every spilled pail, every torn callus reminded her of what the people in town had said, that she wasn't good enough, strong enough, or worthy enough. Each night she sat on the edge of her bed in the attic, sweat-drenched and sore, the cruel voices of the past echoing in her mind. But she didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurting, she was, but because crying felt like giving in, and she had done too much of that already. And yet, over time, something unexpected began to shift. Slowly, subtly, her body started to adapt. Though still heavy, it became stronger. The same chores that had once left her breathless no longer felt insurmountable. Her hands toughened, her arms steadied. She could carry water without sloshing it everywhere, climb fences without fear of falling, and pull herself out of bed before dawn without dreading the sun's rise. The pain in her muscles, once a constant scream, turned into a dull ache of purpose, a sign of progress. But even more significant than the change in her body was the change happening within her. Away from the judgment and noise of the town, Clara could finally hear her own thoughts. In the silence of the fields, beneath endless skies and the rustle of the wind through crops, she started to understand just how long she had let other people's voices define her. Here, on this land, she wasn't the overweight girl, or the town burden. She was just Clara, someone learning, someone working, someone growing. She began to feel a flicker of pride in her efforts, a glimmer of dignity in her sweat-streaked face. She was becoming someone new, someone she might even learn to love. One evening, as the sun began its descent and painted the sky in blazing hues of orange, pink, and gold, Luke asked her to ride with him. He didn't explain why. Clara assumed it was to check fences or deliver supplies to the edge of the property. But as the old truck rattled down the long dirt path, she noticed something odd. The road stretched endlessly ahead, with no sign of turning or stopping. Field after field passed them by, an ocean of green and gold, until nearly an hour had gone by. Finally, Luke stopped the truck on a hilltop that overlooked the land below. The view took Clara's breath away. Acres upon acres unfolded in every direction, bathed in the warm, fading light. It was more than a farm. It was a kingdom of soil and sky. Clara stood silently, overwhelmed, as Luke watched her reaction from the corner of his eye. He still said nothing. But in the days that followed, small truths began to surface. The man she had believed to be a poor, solitary farmer was anything but. Luke owned thousands of acres, land passed down through generations. And yet he lived simply. He chose modest clothes, drove an old truck, and worked harder than any man she had ever met. He could have hired a small army to manage the property, but he didn't. He preferred to work alongside a small, trusted group, not out of pride or frugality, but out of principle. For Luke, wealth wasn't meant to be flaunted. It was a quiet responsibility, a partnership with the land he loved. And as Clara began to see this side of him, she realized something else. Maybe she hadn't been sent here to be punished. Maybe, just maybe, this place, the labor, the silence, the truth of the soil, was the beginning of something far more valuable. A second chance. A home. Clara had begun to understand why life on the farm felt so different from everything she had ever known. In town, worth had always been measured by shallow things: how someone looked, how much money they had, how well they fit into someone else's mold. But here, far from gossiping mouths and judgmental glances, value was defined by character, resilience, and quiet acts of kindness. No one cared about the size of her waist or the rumors that followed her. They cared about how hard she worked, how she treated others, and how she carried herself when no one was watching. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt truly seen, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as a human being deserving of dignity. Luke never spoke many words, but his calm presence and quiet acceptance did more to heal Clara's wounded spirit than any sermon ever could. The rhythm of life on the farm, the way the morning air smelled like possibility, the sound of chickens scratching at the soil, the breeze that carried stories through golden fields, taught her how to live again. She learned how to care for animals with patience and tenderness. She learned how to plant seeds and how to read the sky for signs of rain. But more than that, she learned how to listen, to the wind, to herself, to a life that had always been waiting for her beyond the edge of shame. She found herself laughing without apology, smiling without fear. The shame she had worn like a second skin began to fall away, crumbling like dust from her boots at the end of each long, honest day. As the weeks turned into months, Clara grew into her strength. She began taking initiative, patching fences before Luke asked, organizing supplies, and offering comfort to injured animals with a steadiness that surprised even her. She started cooking hearty meals for the workers and fixing old, forgotten equipment. It was as if she had unlocked something inside herself that had been there all along, buried under years of ridicule and rejection. Luke noticed. The older man with the white beard, who often watched in silence, noticed. Even the land itself seemed to respond, healthier crops, calmer animals, gentler mornings. Clara had come here believing she was someone else's burden. But she was becoming something far more powerful, an asset, a leader, someone who mattered. Then, one day, Luke finally opened up about why he had agreed to take her in. He told her that the townspeople had painted her in the worst possible light, lazy, spoiled, hopeless. But he'd never believed all that. He had seen through their cruelty, seen a young woman who had never been given a real chance. He had brought her to the farm not to punish her, but to offer her something rare, a clean slate. He wanted her to discover what he already suspected, that her worth was never something others had the right to define. And then he said something she would carry with her forever. Sometimes life sends you away from the places where you don't belong, just so you can find the place where you do. That night, Clara stood alone on the same hilltop where she had once seen the fields stretch endlessly toward the horizon. But this time, she saw more than just land. She saw the life she had built with her own hands. She saw the strength in her scars, the wisdom in her silence, and the fire in her heart. She no longer saw herself as the girl the town had labeled her to be. She was strong. She was capable. She was loved, not by those who only knew how to judge, but by those who had chosen to believe in her, long before she could believe in herself. The farm had given her a second chance, yes, but more than that, it had given her the courage to rewrite her story entirely. And so, to anyone watching this, if this story moved you, even for a moment, if it sparked hope, stirred compassion, or reminded you that people can grow in the right soil, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us bring more stories like Clara's to those who need them most. And if you've ever felt misunderstood or judged unfairly, leave us a comment. You never know who your story might save. Because in the end, Clara wasn't just sent to the farm to be changed, she was sent to change everything, including herself.